So the series finale aired a few weeks ago, and I have to say, I mean, I was blown away because usually there's a split among viewers as to whether a series finale is good or not. It's almost always the case. Finales are extremely divisive. It's the last time you're going to see these characters doing anything new. It's the last time you're going to be in that setting, usually. And it's very sad. It's an emotional thing for everyone because with a TV series, you spend a lot of time getting to know these people. You spend a lot of time being invested in their lives, in their storylines. You've imagined yourself the way you want things to end. And no matter how good the ending is to a series, people usually, or bad even, people are usually split. You'll find people on both sides kind of saying, no, I loved it. I see what they were doing. Or I hated it. I didn't understand it at all. I thought it was stupid. I would have ended it this way. There's always going to be differing opinions on a finale of any series. It's the most controversial episode of every show, always. It's always that way. So I was expecting that with Game of Thrones. I was expecting there to be like a split maybe, but there was no split whatever. This is like the most universally hated finale that I've ever seen. I haven't heard anyone defending this series finale, from, television critics, experts, to fans of the show, very vocal fans of the show. I haven't read anyone coming out and saying, this is the finale I was hoping for. This is exactly what I wanted. This is great. It seemed like everyone was just wiping their ass with it. So it's kind of remarkable in that way. I think everyone hated this episode, and pretty much everyone hated the entire final season from start to finish. Which speaks to the passion of the fan base and speaks to how much this show meant to a lot of people. Especially, you've got that whole audience of people who read the books, and now they're like, oh my God, I hope that, George R.R. Martin learns something and changes things completely, because he's still got several books to go. So he's got a lot of things he could change with the ending. He could kind of use the show as almost his, sounding board of what worked, what didn't work. And clearly there was a lot that did not work in that final run of the show. A lot of people unsatisfied with the way things went, and I'm included in that. I just think it's impressive on the part of the showrunners, Weiss and Benioff, that they were able to make an episode that everyone pretty much hated, and that they were able to really ruin a show that so many people thought was one of the greatest TV series ever. I remember I was pissed off because I've always been really into television. I've always been really serious about it. Not always, not since I was like a kid, but in the last 10, 15 years, I've always been really serious about, what I watch and how great television can be. And it really made me mad because there were all these advertisement images of Game of Thrones, especially once you got to about 2014. And I had not watched the show yet at that point. I started watching Game of Thrones. Beth was into it, and I finally relented and gave in. I was mad because, The Sopranos was my favorite HBO show, and everyone was like, well, it's more popular than The Sopranos. It's got more viewers than The Sopranos. It broke all those HBO records that were set by The Sopranos. And people were even having the audacity to say that it was better than The Sopranos, even though it was still in the middle of its run. It was still kind of early in its run. And they were saying that it was the greatest TV show of all time. I remember reading that from the LA Times said that. It was the greatest TV show ever. And this was in 2014. All right, so a few seasons into it. And this was when the show really was at its peak. So when I went back and watched it, and I was like, oh my God, through the first 3 seasons, it is really something fantastic. It's something that you just, every week, you feel like there's something happening that you need to see. And you don't know where it's going to go, but it all makes sense when it gets there. So that's the hallmark of good writing, and that's the hallmark of great television, which keeps you stringing along week after week. But then it just became something so boring and something so predictable and something that was so obsessed with its own heroes that it completely forgot about the teeth that it showed in the first few seasons. And the underlying lesson that there are no magic human beings who are just great people through and through. Everyone's got their flaws, and when people become leaders, usually they end up letting you down no matter how much you liked them in the lead up to that. So that's kind of what they forgot along the way. I just want to know how a show with so much edge during the first half of its run could wither into something so safe and boring in the end over the last few seasons. Everything was telegraphed by 25 miles, and it was so boring, with the exception of one moment that was not telegraphed for 25 miles, and I'll get to that in just a second. The entire finale, though, It was just this feel-good moment after feel-good moment. And if there's one thing that Game of Thrones fans hated during the last few seasons, it was those feel-good moments. People, by and large, hated those reunion, like the seeing the characters that we had seen be on journeys together kind of meet back and have a little, cute moment together and wink at the camera and all that shit. People hated that about this show. So they should have read. I mean, I think that the writers, honestly, they should have been on Twitter a little bit more, seeing what really resonated with the audience and what didn't. And these feel-good moments did not resonate with anyone except for maybe a small subset of the audience, especially not this many. I mean, everyone wanted to see, I think, like Arya and the Hound reunite again, and we wanted to see how that was going to go. That wasn't a cute reunion by any means, but people wanted to see them see each other again to see how they would react to each other. And people wanted to see Jaime and Brienne of Tarth kind of meet up again and probably wanted to see them get it on finally. And so things like that, okay, I'll give you a pass on that because people did want to see that. But the other shit, it didn't need to happen every single episode, every moment after moment. It was all these feel-good things. Like every character in the show got some big moment, especially before they died. If there was if characters died in the last season and they were portrayed as protagonists, then you knew they were going to go out as like in a blaze of glory. They were going to get this great moment where they got to look at the camera, get some applause, and get people ready to grab their tissues. And the death was, you could see it coming from 2 miles away, but they went out heroically. And that, I mean, if you watch the first couple seasons of this show, I mean, the biggest hero in the entire series dies in the most anticlimactic, no moment whatsoever, kind of way. And even the biggest villain in the show, well, at the time anyway, I would say Joffrey, the way he goes out, when he goes out, also very anticlimactic, just kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, he's choking. Oh, he's turning purple. Oh, my God. I mean, he didn't have some big moment. It was just he was at his wedding, and there were tons of characters around. And that ended up being one of the signature moments of the series because, again, it just showed you, man. It's like life is fragile. And if you're a big asshole or if you're somebody who makes their life all about being virtuous and trying to undercut the people who are at the top who are evil, you're going to pay for it. I mean, it's easy to kill you. It's not that hard to kill people. And that's what this show was really showing you in the first few seasons. I mean, characters you thought were safe were not safe at all. But then in the last few seasons, it turned out that they were safe. But if somebody was going to die, you were going to see it coming by 2 miles, and they were going to get some great big moment to shine. And for you to, like I said, grab your tissues and maybe applaud and film a reaction video and post it on YouTube before the series moved on to the next scene. So it was just all kind of just dragged out, and I don't know. I just didn't get it. And there were these heroic characters winning at every turn, winning easily, too, at every turn, and being rewarded for being boring heroes. It was just so against what was set up for the entire series. And what I would have to imagine George R.R. Martin himself envisioned. But, I mean, he was involved with this series, so it's not like we can say he has nothing to do with it, because I'm sure he was consulted a lot during the end run. And I don't know how much they took his word into what happened in the end, but man, I really hope that he kind of changes some things up. I hope this is not what people are going to see in the books. Not that I'm going to read them. I tried to read the first book. I got to tell you, man, I was bored to tears. I don't know, just the writing style, just not my thing at all. I do not like that Tolkien kind of writing style where we're going to spend 25 pages describing somebody's coat. It's just not my style. Needed to move a little bit quicker for me. And I will watch a 10-hour documentary without batting an eye, but if I pick up a book that feels like a phone book, there's no chance in hell that I'm going to read that thing. It's just that's just me, man. I'm sorry. So even Cersei, all right, getting back to the show and ripping the finale, Cersei Lannister, this was not in the finale, this was in the penultimate episode, but Cersei, the biggest outright villain in the entire show. If you asked anyone, who's the biggest villain in Game of Thrones? Nobody would have told you that it was the Night King. They would have told you it was Cersei Lannister because she was fully human, and yet she was just so stone cold and so ruthless, and she stood for all these, like birthright and things that everyone hates. And she was just so brutal, but she was still a human being. She still had that inner, like that love for her children, which was what which like kept her afloat as far as being a human. But she was the biggest villain in the entire show. I think anyone would agree with that. Even Cersei was given a feel-good ending at the end of the series. She gets to die in the arms of the man that she loves, in the place that she loves, hidden away from the eyes of people that she would be embarrassed by. I mean, what kind of a death is that for the biggest villain on the series? You remember how Scar died in The Lion King? That to me is like that's the best villain death. Like that's the prototypical villain death for me. All the animals are gathered around watching the epic fight up at the top with the flames gathered everywhere, and the hero flings his own uncle, this evil lion, off the cliff, and all the people that he was oppressed by get to watch his lifeless body fall and plummet and smash on the rocks. And talk about a cathartic death for a villain. Everyone gets to watch it. Everyone realizes how he died. No one will ever forget it. Simba's a hero forever. But Cersei Lannister just goes down into a hole, basically, gets buried under rubble. No one sees it. She dies with the one person that she loved in the entire world now that all her kids are dead. And that's how it's going to go down. I mean, I just don't understand what was going through their head. To me, that one moment says more about where the show failed than anything else. I mean, everyone was looking forward to how are they going to kill Cersei? Like, we know she's going to die, right? But how are they going to kill her? Like, it's going to be one of the great moments in the show. This show that has been so revered for the way it kills characters. That's one of the all-time great things about the early run of Game of Thrones is it was so great at killing characters in different ways and graphic ways that you'll never forget. But Cersei gets to hug Jaime and get crushed by some rocks, and you don't even see it. So that was it. That was the big villain of the show. That's how she went down. The second big villain, the Night King, gets stabbed in one little spot and explodes and dies. I mean, this is what we were waiting for all that time, and he was that stupid to walk into something that it probably, it had to be a trap. How could it not be a trap? I don't know. I just don't know what they were thinking. It was like they were just thinking so much about giving you big TV moments, and they wanted to make you gasp or something rather than doing things that would have made sense or would have kind of fit with the way the show has been for all these years. And there's a reason why the show was so popular with critics and with fans, and what it was doing was working for those first few years. But then it just, went off the rails and turned into a typical action show. It was an action series. So let me get to that one big, quote-unquote, shocking moment that did happen in the run-up to the finale. So the writer's idea on Game of Thrones, the idea for a shocking twist, a George R.R. Martin-style moment that was going to have everyone talking, was to turn the show's biggest symbol for revolution and uprising into a genocidal despot who suddenly enjoys killing innocent people. Like that's what they came up with for their big shocking reveal. It came out of nowhere, and that is not a compliment for a TV series at all. So I'm talking obviously about Daenerys, and when she just suddenly decides, yeah, I think I'm going to burn everyone alive in this city, children, included, innocent, just working people, servants, everyone. I'm just going to kill them all and crush the city. All I could think about while she was burning down King's Landing was the infrastructure costs, and so you're going to spend the first half of your rule rebuilding this city that you could have left standing. You're going to spend all your money doing that. You're going to that's what you want? You want everyone to be scared of you, and you want to spend all your time rebuilding buildings when you could be actually doing different things to change things? So I don't know. The whole thing was just so stupid, and it showed her as really just a moron who had like horse blinders on. She could only see one thing in front of her, and that was not at all how this character thought or acted for the entire run. They sold her so short. In the end, I have to imagine Emilia Clarke was pissed because she was more invested in this character's run than anyone on Earth could be. Any fan could possibly be. Any writer could possibly be. This was her. This was the role that made her, who she is as far as an actor. And she has to read that, yeah, you're gonna just on a dime turn into like the most evil person in the show, and you're gonna do something so stupid, something that makes no sense, and I do not understand where, like, what she thought would come of it that would have been good at all. So it would, and all it was just to shock you. Like, that was the whole point. We're gonna do a sudden twist, and she's gonna actually be evil because she saw her best friend get killed. I mean, honestly, somebody who had lived through the death of a husband that in the beginning, treated her like an object and raped her, but ended up being someone that she, really loved and had a true bond with. She lived through that. She lived through all the shit she's gone through, the constant abuse from her brother of all those years, and she finally got to see him burn, and she's really going to flip that switch and become just as bad as the rest of her family. I don't know. It didn't make any sense when you thought about it. It fell apart very quickly. So going back though to that, the big moment with Daenerys when she decides she's going to kill everybody. So, okay. Yes, the Red Wedding was as shocking as anything that we've ever seen. Right? That was the most shocking thing that I've maybe ever seen on television. Going back to, what was that, season 4? The Red Wedding was nuts, and it blew everyone's mind, and it made this show kind of the juggernaut that it would become. But it was partly because it made sense to us, and it made the Stark family pay for being entirely too trusting. So the Red Wedding made sense. Yes, it was shocking. Yes, it was completely violent and brutal, but it in some way made some sense to us. And it felt natural, right? Obviously, they showed us a few times here and there that Daenerys liked to hand out bloody justice. But killing an entire city of regular people that included slaves and animals and rulers alike? I mean, because you know how many slaves she had to have burned up there too. She wasn't worried about freeing these people. She wasn't worried about giving them a better life. She just wanted them to die. I mean, what sense did that make? Clearly, if she wanted to burn up the Red Keep, and she wanted to torch that to the ground, fine. Totally makes sense. Wants to blast all of Cersei's army, wants to command, Grey Worm to cut all their throats even though they've surrendered. I could see that being something that would happen, and it would make sense. Completely makes sense. But to kill all these innocent people just didn't make any sense to me. It just did not fit with that character whatsoever. It was everything she stood against for her entire life, and I don't think she'd give it up that quickly. We had absolutely no hint of it coming other than her bloodline. So I guess in the end, the entire theme of the series ends up being that whatever your family is, whatever your family, however your family behaves, whatever family line you're born into, you are completely unable to act any different than your ancestors. That's kind of what they were saying, I guess, because the Stark kids are all basically like Ned Stark. And all of the Lannisters are basically, just like Tywin Lannister, and except for Tyrion, who I guess magically is able to be the only person in the entire show who escapes their family's line. All of the Targaryens are exactly like the Targaryens, except for Jon Snow, who didn't even find out he was a Targaryen to the last minute. So I guess it's a nurture versus nature kind of thing here. But it doesn't even make any sense because Daenerys came up and came of age on her own. So she wasn't even raised in that household. So I don't know. It's just the whole thing doesn't make any sense no matter how you try to look at it. Because there's a huge difference in enjoying killing and enjoying vengeance and suddenly turning into a genocidal maniac. I mean, that's not the same thing at all. The sad thing about this finale, though, in the end, is that I think absolutely nobody is going to be talking about it in 10 years' time. And I think what it's going to really hurt, it's going to hurt the rewatch value of this show for people who never watched it the first time around. I don't think a lot of people are going to be flocking to see Game of Thrones because a finale goes a long way. When you know that you can look forward to a finale that's great, it makes you want to watch the series because you know it's all going to go somewhere satisfying. But when you know a whole show, and there are a lot of episodes of Game of Thrones, 73 episodes, an hour each, some of them are like 2 hours long, and it's this heavy subject matter, heavy material. It doesn't exactly make you want to look forward to watching this show when you know it all ends with a whimper. So, people to this day still mention the ending of shows like The Sopranos and shows like Lost for different reasons, People are split on both of them, but it's because they were memorable. Those endings were just so memorable. People still talk about the ending of Saint Elsewhere. It was a hospital series that aired 30 years ago, but people still talk about the ending of that show because it was memorable. The ending of MASH, the highest, rated TV episode of all time, scripted television episode of all time. People still talk about it because it's memorable. It's stuck in people's minds. The ending of Game of Thrones, not memorable at all. No one will talk about it. The ending to this show was so storybook and vanilla that it will completely be lost to the show's most memorable moments. And I think that's really a sad thing because this show was really something special when it started out, and it just turned into something so typical and just boring and predictable. So that's my thoughts on the Game of Thrones series finale. I'm sorry if you wanted to hear me maybe come up with a counterpoint and defend it a little bit, but I just can't in this case because this was a show that I really did think was something special when I finally got into it, and I could see what the appeal was and why people were so electrified by this show because the first few seasons, if you watch the first 4 or 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, it's unlike anything you've seen before. It is something really memorable and special, but then after that, it all just falls off. So do I recommend you watching Game of Thrones if you've never seen it? I do. I still do recommend you watching it because there are going to be references people will make to things that happen in that show that you'll want to know if you're interested in knowing that kind of stuff. And because you are watching some great acting, some really memorable characters, some fantastic sets, costuming, awesome music, and really memorable scenes of character interaction and of character deaths and things like what storytelling could be on television as far as movie quality television. Game of Thrones is right up there with some of the best looking TV that I've ever seen. So I do recommend watching it just for that, but just be aware that you're going to be disappointed in the end, and maybe that'll make it better and easier to watch because you don't have the high expectations. But the first few seasons, you'll be as drawn in as anyone has been by this show because it's electrifying. It's great TV, and unlike anything that we've really ever seen before on the medium. So Game of Thrones is over. What did you think? Did you disagree? Did you think the finale was strong? Did you like anything about it? Email me at theclintdavis@gmail.com, theclintdavis@gmail.com. It stinks, as Jay Sherman would say.